we met Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca in the original Star Wars trilogy. Quite tall, his hand was about the size of my foot. We met him at a function. It was like a mixer. I gave him a lift back to his hotel, and during that time we were chatting in the car, and I sort of said, well, if you're sick of restaurant food, you're welcome to come around to our place for a barbecue, and so he agreed, and so then he came over the next day.
I didn't meet anyone, but I saw Brandon Flowers at Smith & Coe's. He was going down the escalator and I was going up the escalator. And
who's Brandon Flowers?
He's the singer from The Killers. Yeah, classic band.
I met Quentin Tarantino. He walked out of the toilet and I bumped into him. His hair was quite dark and his skin looked really smooth.
I met Jason Statham. He came into my work in Ponsonby Central. I didn't know who Jason Statham was, and I didn't know that I was talking to him.
When I was working at JB Hi-Fi, Jeffrey Rush bought a bunch of DVDs and CDs.
I met Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. I got invited on a Spanish television show to take a robotic lamp that I'd made, and we met on the show.
We heard Rod Stewart on the radio station. We got talking and we were like, oh, it's funny, he's in the country, he's probably just at the Langham Hotel down the road. Fast forward a couple of hours, it's like really busy, so I'm not really like focusing on the people I'm serving, you know, you just don't really like make eye contact because it gets really weird. This old guy comes in and he's wearing like a black trench coat, like their total outfit, like when someone says like looking conspicuous, they put on that outfit. My workmate was trying to make eye contact with me apparently the whole time I was serving him, going like, oh my god, that's Rod Stewart, and I had no idea until I left the store.
I said that I'd tell you about the time that I met Sir Richard Attenborough. He used to come into the bookshop where I worked in London, and he came up to me and he asked if we had a certain book. And I looked at him in horror, I think, and I said in my New Zealand accent, I'm sorry, but I don't think we have that book. And he was so sweet, he put his arm around me and he said, that's all right, dear, no problem.
I met this guy named Kim Dong-gyu, who is a famous, very well-known opera singer from Korea. My mum's a pianist, and so she was invited to be the accompanist for him.
I was up north somewhere on a road trip with my brother. It would have been 2004. We went to get an ice cream from this ice cream shop, and this guy walked past the door and everyone starts fluffing around inside. Oh my god, Daniel Bedingfield just walked past. And I turned to my brother and I was like, Bedingfield, Schmedingfield, he's a dick. And then I heard Mr. Bedingfield was standing right behind me. He's like, it's okay if you don't like my music, but I'm a nice guy.
I had just moved to London and I was working in a menswear store in South Kensington, and this like silver flashy sports car drove up on the footpath in front of the store, and Seal came in. All of us in the shop were kind of running around finding clothes for him and working with him, and then eventually wrapping up a massive pile of clothes. Yeah, so he spent like all this money, and then at the end of it was like super thankful to all of us, and then was like, would you guys like to hear like one of my new songs? So what do you say? You're like, yeah, Theo, I'd love to. So he went back to his car, parked outside, and whipped out his guitar. I kind of sat there like on the floor like a school kid, you know, like when you're cross-legged, and thought this was the most surreal experience of my life. Like, I'm a little boy from like Upper Hutt, like,
and Seal's reading your story.
Seal is basically serenading me right now.
Through Radio with Pictures, I met quite a few people. I met Lou Reed, and Lou was here, I think it was in 1984 on the New Sensations tour, and he agreed to give us an interview. I was pretty nervous, I must admit, because I've been a long-time fan of Lou. So we started off, and I had quite a long question to start with, which was an odd way of doing it, but I thought I've got to establish that I do actually know what I'm talking about here. And I had a question based on the liner notes of Metal Machine Music. He was pretty good. He certainly gave to me. There's no doubt about that.
I met Robert Winston. He's a famous biologist, probably most well known from BBC documentaries that you may have watched in science class at school or on TV. And he asked me what I wanted to be when I was older, and I said I wanted to be a photographer. And he was like, "Oh, that's cool."
Other Velvet Underground members I've met include Nico, which was a completely different story, I must say. She was really, really wired. As everybody knows, she was a junkie. And she arrived in New Zealand, and I think that, from what I heard later, everywhere she went, she was trying to score. And the same thing went down at the interview that we did. She was a difficult one. She was, and she was a bit scary too, I have to admit. So at the end of the interview, wouldn't leave. And the band just left her behind. They went back to the hotel and they said, "Oh, she'll be all right. Just get her to the hotel later." Wow. So she drank and carried on. And she would tell these incredible stories from her past. And she'd draw you in and her voice would get quieter. So you'd be leaning forward, listening to what she'd have to say. And then she'd say, "Do you know where I can get some heroin?"
Late 80s, I decided to go and live in New Zealand. I think it was Trade and Exchange magazine. This guy was selling downbeat magazines. About 60 kilos of magazines. Once I read a paper and there was like Farrah Sanders is coming to New Zealand, and I was like, wow, so excited. He was one of my favorite tenor saxophone players. I said, I better go to these magazines and maybe I'll find something about this guy. And I found this magazine, which was Downbeat from May 16, 1968. After the concert, and I meet the manager of the event, and I said, here's the photo, is he, I would like to see him if possible, and he said, okay, just for a very short time. So I met him, then I said, oh, by the way, can you maybe sign this? And when I was taking out this Downbeat magazine, he realized it was the magazine that he had his first interview, and he was like, oh, where did you find this? So we had like a little bit more chat and one drink, because otherwise he would just say, okay, see you later. It was like amazing experience to meet one of the best jazz tenors of all time, and yeah, I was so kind of fortunate and happy. Came home, couldn't sleep.